In this presentation, we will use the Pay Bills feature. So in other words, we had entered the bill in the past. Bill has been entered. We're going to be using the Pay Bill feature. As we use the Pay Bill feature, it will be decreasing the accounts payable and writing the check, which will be decreasing cash within QuickBooks Pro 2020, QuickBooks Desktop 2020. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by selecting the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. Where we are going to be at this time is within the vendors section. Instead of simply writing a check, we're going to be using the Pay Bills feature. Now note, as we've been going through this first month of operations, we've been doing more of kind of the cash-based type transactions. In other words, we paid the bills at the end of the month in a prior presentation with checks. Next month, we'll do more of the accrual type process in that we'll be entering the bills and then we will be paying them using the Pay Bill feature. So notice then that if you go through the full process on the vendor section, which we've seen to some degree with regards to the inventory, but even there, we didn't really pay the bill. We went right to the check. With regards to normal type of vendors, like if you say you don't have inventory or other vendors other than inventory, you could still enter all the bills here, and there's some advantages to doing this. If you enter the bills first, then QuickBooks will sort the bills. In other words, if you think about you're sitting at even at your personal finances or the business finances, you often get the bills, you have the bills lined up. You can wait with the bills in a stack of bills to determine when you want to actually process them and write a check for them. But that can be a bit tedious, and the dates are going to be more difficult to track. What you can do instead then is put all the bills as you get them into QuickBooks using this feature, the Enter Bills. If you select this, it looks like a check, but in actuality, it's going to be a bill. A bill means within QuickBooks, and notice this isn't a bill we're sending out. This is a bill to us, a bill we have received. As we enter the bill, it means that accounts payable, the liability account, will then be going up. Accounts payable will then be going up. And then the other side will be the expense or whatever we have. So it's nice to have that, because then once you enter these bills, if I close this back out, we'll have the expense that will be recorded at the point in time that we received the bill, which is probably more correct with regards to accrual accounting. Then we can go into the pay bills over here, and we can sort the bills in different formats to determine which bills we want to pay when we want to pay them. So it's a lot easier to organize and pay. The other advantage to this, or what could be an advantage, even if we pay all the bills at the same time, you may want to enter the bills here, and it sorts them nice and easily so that when you go to the pay bills, if you're going to use the printer, for example, with QuickBooks and print the checks, I like to have it, or the system I used to use to do that was to enter the bills and then basically pay all the bills at once, and then I can enter all the checks that I want in that system, as opposed to writing checks. I could still write the checks and say I want to print them all at one time, but I find it's nice to use the enter bills and then write the checks. So if you're printing the checks out of QuickBooks, that would be another reason that you might want to use the pay bills. We haven't entered any bills. Again, we will be doing that next time. However, we did enter a beginning balance into accounts payable for a bill that had been entered into the past. QuickBooks put that into the bills. Let's check that out. We're going to go to the reports up top. We're going to go to the company and financial. We'll first start off with the balance sheet. So let's take a look at the balance sheet. We'll change the dates by going to the customized report in the top left. Dates are going to be from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, January 1st to December 31st, 2020. We will say OK, and this is going to be our balance sheet. If we scroll down to the accounts payable, you'll recall we have this $15,000. We didn't enter that with a bill. We entered it with the beginning balance with the vendor as we double click on it and then I'm going to change the dates to the prior year, 01/01/19, so we can see the entry. And that's going to be Epiphone. So when we entered Epiphone, the vendor, who we buy our guitars from, because we sell guitars and we buy them, then we said that they had an opening balance of that $15,000. What did QuickBooks do when they did that? When we set that up, they called it a bill, because that's the bill, that's the document or the form that will typically be used when you increase the accounts payable. So if we double click on that, we see the bill. This is the bill that we are now going to pay. So we're going to pay off this bill. I'm going to close this back out. Close this back out, so that $15,000 should go down after we pay it. When we do that, typically we're going to go back to the Home tab. We could go to just simply write check, but it's usual in this process to go to Bill and then pay bills. If we select pay bills, then we see the bill is right here. It's already set up. Now, this is the only bill we have so far. If you're in a large company that has a lot of outstanding bills, then the accounts payable could obviously be a full-time job where you're sorting the accounts payable, working with this section a lot to sort the bills that you have. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the following presentation. So you have a few settings up here, however, we'll go through now, which is to show bills. We can either show due on or before, which again, if you had a lot of bills, you can say, hey, I want to know what the due date is, and then basically sort them on or before this due date. So that can help a lot to sorting the bills. Or as it's selected here, show all bills. You also have some filtering options. If we select the filter, we can find all the bills related to, for example, a particular vendor here. So if we only have Epiphone, so Epiphone would be the vendor that we would be having. Sort by due date, so we can sort by due date here. So we only have the one bill we're going to pay. We're going to go ahead and check off the bill that we are going to pay. We left this field blank. I'll sort it by all vendors and then check this off. So there's our Epiphone. And then the payment is going to be down here. Now, note when we do this, it's basically just going to write a check. We're in essence writing the checks in this format. So we're going to go down below and check out the features. We're going to say this is going to be as of January 28th, 2020. We're going to say that we are writing checks. Now, this is the nice feature you have if you're actually going to be printing the checks. Because if you have the actual checks, they're still going to have to be pre-printed in a sense. And we're just going to put basically the numbers on it. The check numbers, in other words, will be pre-printed. You still need the checks from the bank. You have to put those checks into the printer, and then you could select to be printed, and you can go through and actually print these checks in order if there's a bunch of checks out at the same point in time. So that's a pretty nice way to be able to sort not only the bills that you want to pay, when you want to pay them, and to print the checks out of this system as well. Now, we are not going to be printing the checks. We just want to assign the check number. So in our system, we're going to say, hey, we're going to have the checks, but we're going to have the checks basically, we're just handwriting the checks we're saying here outside of the system, and then we're going to assign the appropriate check number. So we're going to go down here to the assign number, and of course the checking account is going to be the checking account. So then I'm going to say pay the selected bill. So pay the selected bill. This will then pop up because we wanted to assign the check number. So it says here, how do you want to assign the check number? Let QuickBooks assign the check numbers. I'm going to say, yeah, let QuickBooks do that. Why? Because QuickBooks should assign the next number that's in order. Now, I'm going to check this by going to the register. So now what we're imagining here, I'm actually writing a check by hand out of the checkbook for this check, and now I'm entering it into the system so QuickBooks has it recorded within the system. So I'm going to say, okay, now, and obviously if I wanted to write the check and just put the check here, I can. But I'd rather let QuickBooks do it because then QuickBooks will automatically assign the numbers, and that gives us a bit of a double check for us, a check against, an error happening because of the pre-printed check number. So I would say okay, and then it assigns the numbers, so never run out of checks. Now it's giving you basically an advertisement to see if you want to basically order checks. So we're gonna just close this back out. And then it gives us a recap, and now we can see, of course, the check number that was assigned. I like to go into the register and just check it out there. So I'm going to close this out, and we'll go into the check register. So I'm going to go into the banking section up top. We're going to go into the use register. We have the checking account open. That's the one we want. We're going to say OK. And then within the check register, we see here it is, the Epiphone check that was written. Now, notice the check number that it put in place is the next check number in line. That should line up. If I was to write my checks out of my normal checkbook, it should be the next check that's in line because it should line up, and QuickBooks should just be picking the next number. So again, that's a good kind of double check internal control over the cash and the checks. So I'm going to close this back out and see what happened to our balance sheet. Going back to the balance sheet, we see then that the accounts payable now is at 0. 0 in the accounts payable. We have now paid it off. Double clicking on it, we then see that the $15,000 had a beginning balance. Now it's paid off. If I go back to the prior year, 2019, to see the original transaction, it was a bill, and then we had the pay bill. Notice bill, pay bill, right? Or bill payment check. And also note that this is still just a check, but QuickBooks will basically differentiate the check that we assigned with the form of the bill payment as opposed to a normal check that we just wrote a check for, which is nice because then it gives us that added detail in terms of what was the data input that we used. If we double click on this, you'll see it goes just to a check. It doesn't go into that data input screen. That data input screen, in essence, is what formatted or made the check. So it's just a check here. However, in the little reference thing, it's going to say, yeah, but you used the bill pay check to do it. That means it can't. The check went against typically accounts payable is what that's going to mean. So a bill pay check means accounts payable went down, and then the other was of course cash on the other side. I'm going to close this back out. And now we're going to take a look at, note the vendor balance detail. We took a look a few times at this point to the supporting document for the accounts receivable, similar type of supporting document for accounts payable. Both of these areas, specialty areas. If there's a lot of accounts receivable, you'll have people that work specifically in the receivables. If you have a lot of payables, people that work specifically in the payables and use reports such as these. So I'm going to go up top. We're going to go to the vendors and payables. And we want to see then the vendor balance detail. Vendor balance detail. And within the vendor balance detail, we don't have much detail because we only have the one vendor here. There'll be more next month. We'll do this a little bit more next month. But we have the bill that was entered when we entered the beginning balance, then we paid it. This will be the typical kind of supporting information that we should see in accounts payable. It should go up with a bill, then we should pay it, and it should go back down to zero. That should be the typical kind of scenario we should see, similar to what we see in the accounts receivable, where it goes up with an invoice, and then it goes down when we receive the payment for it.